Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Day Witness podcast, where we'll be sharing stories of people who experience discrimination in Norway. Today we have Christina Violeta Thrane Storsve. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right now. She is one of the leaders of the Adoption in Transition Foundation, Adopsjon I, endring, which is a Ressurssenter for adoptees and their families. Welcome.
Thanks. Thank you.
So why don't we start off talking a little bit about the organization that you're leading?
Yeah, the organization has now existed for 2 years. It's a formalized part of 6 or 7 years where we have been working very specifically with one thing, which was to be able to have adoption. I have to say a little bit about adoption for you to actually understand what the organization is all about. And not a lot of people think about adoption as such every day. So we can have some basic facts maybe. Today there are 60,000 national adoptees, meaning Norwegian-born kids moved within families. Yeah, and then there are 20,000 intercountry adoptees. So that's very interesting to see that there are actually 80,000, more or less, if we just say adoptees. I was adopted from Guatemala, so I'm one of 20,000 intercountry adoptees. The work, we have always had a system where, well, not always, since adoption started, it was started based on crisis, world crisis. For instance, war in Vietnam or Korea and such kind of started like we see today, actually. If we look to Haiti a few years ago, or Ukraine, where the question of adopting the war kids, if I can use that term, always is a question, what could we do to save the kids? So that was kind of the start for the adoption. And when they started to develop this, they had to have a system where they had screened the parents. It had to be an official affair. It couldn't be a private affair. And then they had a lot of things that the parents needed to be, like they need to have a stable economy, they need to have a house, a job, etc., etc., etc. So every focus was on the parents. But once they were able to adopt, every document was in order. They went to the country, or even like 30, 40 years ago, we were sent to Norway. We weren't picked up, which actually says something very important about how they think that, how does this attachment, like the human attachment between a mother or father and child, we were escorted on a plane with many other kids, or maybe we had to take care of some other kids, and then a perfectly stranger came to send us on a plane, etc. So not everybody was picked up in their original country. Once they landed on Norwegian earth, we were Norwegian citizens. Christina was, well, in my case, it's a little bit different, but many names were Norwegianized, to say it as such. We have a lot of, my parents' name would be like Ingrid, Toren, etc. And you would have typically Norwegian names for kids from 37 different countries. But once they had the Norwegian name, the Norwegian citizenship, everything was Norwegian. And then they didn't have any specific help, because the rights for the Norwegian family is all the rights the whole society has. The one point they missed, which was huge, and why this foundation actually exists, is that there was no post-adoption services. So if you came home with a 2-year-old or a 10-year-old, there were nobody there to check up, hi, how are you doing? Because these kids had their lives all turned upside down. Some of them came like 3 siblings. Some of the 10-year-olds might have been used to be the parent, and all of a sudden they're coming into a family where the parents have to learn how to be the parent, and the oldest kid has to be able to relearn how to be a kid. But if you have lived on the street, or if you have lived in an orphanage, or all the things that could have happened to that kid before, it was kind of erased. So in very simple phrase, in an adoption, the past was kind of erased. And then once you come to Norway, then you're on your own. And this system is still in many ways that way. there is no specific adoption competence center, for instance, where you could go and say, hey, my kid, or even me as an adult adoptee, I have these needs, I don't understand this, who can help me, etc. So in 2016, they revised the law, the adoption law, and our main goal was to have post-adoption services included. That means guidance and professional help in the different areas. And our base was always that these kids have been taken care of in a system before, like custody system for kids, right? And then they are transferred into Norwegian families. So if we look at the system in Norway, where we see foster kids, for instance, for various reasons, they have a very similar past to the adoptive kids. And they have a system where they have a person that guides you, a person that gives the courses to the parents. They have one particular person that is your contact person, so in case something happens, then you have somebody to call. So if we take those two kids, if you're in the foster care system, you have the whole system on your side. And of course, we can criticize every system in Norway as such. No system is perfect. So they also probably will have many areas where they need to improve, enhance things. But there's a system for them where it says, hey, this is a work for us as a society. We take this task of being this kid's parents very seriously, and we need to be a team. For the adoptive parents and the adoptive kids, it was like, manage on your own. So that's the major thing, that why we wanted to have this foundation. In 2016, we started knocking on politicians' doors saying, hey, we need to talk about adoption. The main answer we got was, isn't adoption a win-win situation? And we were like, let's see, let's go back to point one. And then all of a sudden, people started to ask, I see what you mean, because we have so many people who have experienced different stories about how they develop their identity. Not all adoptees come to families who are actually ready to be a family. And there are so many different nuances in this that there are so many questions that has to be asked. But the politicians were just like, we thought it was a good idea. That's a very simple way to say it. But that was how it all started out. So basically it was kind of a way for us to educate people. What is adoption? What other stories are there than just the reunification, which we see in TV, where a camera follows the adoptee to their birth country and then they are reunited and they lived happily ever after. If we just watch that kind of part and we don't watch what's happened before or after. But the last 6 or 7 years, we see that the politicians have opened their eyes. Societies it has opened their eyes. Now, it's not such a question of, is there really a need for post-adoption services, like being able to go to a psychologist that has actually experiences with microaggression, racism, how is it to grow up with that and live with that, all these kinds of things that adoptees meet. Now it's not a question, do they really need it, but it's more like, what do they need? So that's been a huge movement. Then 2 years ago, we wanted to make the foundation because we wanted to be for everybody. We didn't want to be a member organization where you have to say, in order to be a part of this organization, you need to agree with us. You have to pay this to be able to talk to us or to be a part of the environment, because we have already paid so much in our histories being erased as such. And we also wanted it to be, as it says, a resource centers for adoptees and their families. And families can be either our adoptive parents or adoptive siblings, it can be our biological mom and dad, or family sisters, it can be our kids, because sometimes our kids are more interested in the adoption than we are. So there's a broad spectrum of people who can actually benefit, and also because we believe that we all have a resource. We can have experiences that are very, very heavy, but we all have some kind of resource, and that's why it's a resource center. So if you were adopted and you wanted to write something, sing something, start a group of conversation, or whatever is your research, our job is to say, hey, yeah, and we have this person that also is interested in that, and we can help you with this, and to kind of make a huge network. where people are contributing as well. While we politically are still saying that we need to, by law, that's our goal, that has always been this way. Our goal is that it has to be a part of the law, that the post-adoption services must be applied, obligatory for every family that adopts. Yeah.
And it's interesting to hear what you say, and I think there's no doubt like the work you're doing for this foundation is so important. So at the back of my mind, when you were describing, how the foundation developed and established, one of the questions I had in my mind was, surely Barnebarn, which is the child welfare services here, should be doing something about this. They should have the tools to help you, whether you're an adoptee as a kid, to be able to navigate that. That was my first question. Where does Barnebarn fit in this, in your experiences? And secondly, what are the needs do you think adoptees need? To start there, because for those who are listening in who haven't had a clue about adoptees and the journey that you've been, and we're hoping to kind of explore that here, is what kind of needs do you as adoptees need?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say the child welfare service, because when we started out we said that adoptee kid or adoptive kids are other countries' child welfare services kids. And that was kind of, when we went to the authorities here and said that, they were like mind blown, because they always kind of thought about it, but they never dared to say it out loud. And when we started to say that, we had kind of a massive reaction, but that's also our job, me and my colleagues' job, to say and coin these things and say, this is what it is. And if you can kind of take that perspective, that the child services have been taking care of these kids in another country before they came here, then maybe you can start kind of seeing what needs they do have as well. Because the needs when they're kids would be actually somebody that can support the parents to say, hey, yeah, this kid was actually traumatized by XXX. And these responses are normal for kids that have experienced this. The development of their social skills can be affected by it. Their mental health can be affected by it. And the parents need somebody to ask, hey, is this normal? Like every parent will ask themselves once they gave birth to a child and they have it there and just like, is this normal? And then, it has been so hard, I think, for many adoptive parents to actually ask the question, because they have felt that if I ask that question, I already have been approved parent. I have a document that says that I am allowed to be a parent. So I think that the need for the kids who come is somebody to actually guide the parents, and also, of course, to understand the culture that they come from. Because as I started out telling you, once we hit Norwegian soil, we were Norwegian. They gave us brown cheese, Norwegian names, almost put on our bunads, and just like, or at least Norwegian clothes. And then you're Norwegian. And if you grow up in a family where your parents look at you as Norwegian, the only thing they have experienced your whole infancy and when you grow up, then of course it's going to be a mismatch. So the parents also need guidance in how to honor the culture they come from, how to explore the culture with them, and also how to explore the loss, because they lost their entire family. They lost their mom, they lost their dad, they lost possibly some siblings, and if they were put in orphanage or in a foster care home maybe, they have started to attach to a new adult person, which they also lose. So every adoptee has at least one or two losses that are like, that's their safety, that's the whole world for them, and it's been taken away from them. And how do we as parents create a good environment in a family in order to be a good family together and not to kind of have this separation. The child has to deal with its own things, and me as a parent has to deal with whatever parenting is, but kind of see that this is a family that has to work together. And that's the kind of guidance the parents and the kids would have needed. Some kids need other people that speak their mother tongue. That's the only thing they've been used to hear for 5 years, and all of a sudden they are supposed to adapt to Norwegian. But here is the post-adoption services coming in, because there's no such program that says that if you were born in X country and X was your mother tongue, then when you arrive, you are supposed to have like a teacher that follows you 1 year so that you can have an easy transition. All of that job is put on the kid. And then, of course, if we jump into the teenage years, young adults, my age adults, and even then when you are a grandparent yourself as an adoptee, etc., there will be at all these stages, you will have different needs. For instance, when I was a mom myself, the first time I gave birth and kind of realized, oh my God, my mom went through giving birth to me, breastfeeding me, and then I was taken away. And now I see my kid smiling at me, and I could never have given him away. Or even the things that when you go pregnant and I can't ask my mom, how was your pregnancy? Because maybe she wasn't pregnant. Maybe she didn't breastfeed. Or so many adoptees will have kind of different experiences during life. Giving birth is also when society kind of starts, oh, do you know about any diseases in your family? And you instinctively think about your family at home, which were Norwegian born. But then again, you start, wow, I got another mom or dad, but I don't know anything about it. I don't know anything about the DNA in my body, which is kind of, so that would be also a need. And then if we see today, how things are today, where a lot of focus has been on illegal adoptions and also on adoptees searching for their biological families, there are tons of things that they need, help, support, from different kinds of the system as it is right now, and where we and the foundation try to be like an equal person, trying to help them, guiding them with our experiences and with our network. But there are so many things that they kind of need during all these years, and that's one of the things we have also been focusing on, that the adoption kind of doesn't stop. It's a lifelong experience, a lifelong thing that you just have to continue living. So my fear, for instance, would be to lose my parents and to be an orphan again. What do I do when I have connection with my biological mom as well? What will I do when both my moms die? I will be completely alone, and how is that going to affect me when I'm number one of the family, trying to be the person that kind of like mom number one, you know? So there are so many layers that you would have need to kind of just go to see somebody and talk, hi, how is this experience for you? Or go to a psychologist that actually has, like I said, some experience about how does it feel to live with microaggressions, doubts, discrimination, and you don't know when they kind of pop up or appear. But if you don't choose carefully to which therapist you go to, then you will not have any mirroring, you will maybe not have any connection, and you might be starting, okay, is there something wrong with me? Which is a thought and a feeling that you probably have felt a million of times since you were growing up, because of society and how they see you. Brown skinned, white parents, how do I fit in? Yeah.
It's kind of like if you're walking into a therapy session, there's also a degree of secondary trauma to it. Because you already have one trauma, and then when you're meeting with a therapist who perhaps is giving you some kind of microaggression as well during the conversation. That's also secondary to that. And you know, you were talking about the attachment and the separation, the fear of abandonment, and that for me speaks loud and clear trauma. You know, in many ways, and the processes, you know, of being adopted. Like you said, your past is being erased, but yet you still remember it. Maybe not consciously in your mind, but like maybe your body remembers like how it was being a child. And I think like for those who kind of understand a bit more about trauma, you know, your body remembers, you know, all these things. And another thing, the interesting thing that we also discussed before we jumped into this interview here was also talking about language, you know, and you also mentioned it here as well, and how if you are coming as an adoptee and you're still speaking your mother tongue, which is not Norwegian, and not having that support. This is the first that I'm hearing it. Actually, it made sense. You know, it's kind of like it's interesting because it's something that I have looked into. You know, how do you go into learning multiple languages? For example, my daughter, you know, she's growing up Norwegian, but I want her to also be able to speak Cantonese and be able to speak English in a certain way. Now, in the U.S., there's been already research and studies on how do you go about it. You know, you use the strength of your mother tongue and then introduce a new language in. So seeing elsewhere doing that, and yet, interestingly, here in Norway, they still haven't quite catched on. That's what I'm hearing. But also there's, on top of that language learning experiences and also the trauma being away from your biological parents, there's also a bit of identity crisis when you come in to here. So I guess what I'm trying to lead to now is, I believe from what I've spoken to you about is that you also have experience of discrimination as a leader of the foundation, but also you have experience of discrimination as a person, as an adoptee. So could you walk through maybe some of your first memories or experiences of discrimination then, whether as an adoptee or as a leader of the foundation?
Yeah, I think if we go systematically and actually look at the system, why is it so that there is no post-adoption services? That's the discrimination in itself. How come Norway has been able to not see, or even worse, forget, if that's the case? But I think it's mainly they haven't seen that there are 20,000 inter-country adoptees and 60,000 national adoptees who are in need of something extra because of how their start of life was. So that's the main discrimination. Yes, we have all other rights as Norwegian citizens, but with dealing with the consequences of what happened to us, which actually is founded in agreement between two states saying, hey, yeah, we want to adopt your kids and we want to take care of them. But then they let go and kind of just said, yeah, well, that's for the private family to deal with. So that's the main discrimination, I think, for us. And also that we're not able to kind of pin it on something exact. All ministries can say, well, that's that ministry's responsibility, etc. Because we're not immigrants, even though we're immigrants, and we're not completely Norwegian, so it's kind of falling between two chairs. So that's, I think, is the main discrimination, that we don't have any system for taking care of adoptees. For my personal experience, it started very early. And looking back at it, I think the most shocking thing for me, or emotionally heavy thing for me, is that I felt really alone with dealing with it. And it started very early on. I think I might have been around 12 or something when I understood that that was what it was all about. My mom was one of the first people in our little neighborhood to have an answering machine, because she was working for an organization. So every day I came running home and I thought it was so intriguing to have this high technology coming home and like just pushing button and play, listening who left a message for my mom this day, because nobody ever called me to leave a message because we were interacting. We didn't even have mobile phones, so we were just playing in the street and such. When I came home one particular day, what I hear is like, you're a fucking Negro, you need to go home. I was like, okay, I'm not sure I understand this. I hear the tone of voice is not wanting something good for me. And then just, what do I do with this? How do I deal with somebody in a little place where everybody knows everybody. And my mom was a teacher at the school, so she definitely knew and recognized this boy's voice. How do I deal with this? How do I kind of just, do I say anything? I don't feel okay. And my thoughts were to go home to where I came from. I am home. Should I go into my room? Should I go to Guatemala? I was born in Guatemala. I can't go to Guatemala. How should I? I don't have the money. I don't know why, how, where. And all of these thoughts were like trying to decipher what was actually being said. And I couldn't understand it. It was too much for my mind to kind of, you know. But I remember that my color was used against me. And sometimes I think I thought, oh, no, that's not about my color, but it's about me being really excited about reading stuff. I loved school. I was probably what they call a nerd or a geek, if you have to categorize me. But so I was kind of like trying to understand the other. And that is one of the main things that I have been, well, maybe struggling with, to kind of see, is it my responsibility or your responsibility? And this doubt that might it be that I just misunderstood you, and I have always been trying to have an open mind, etc. But then sometimes racism is just racism, and it just kind of hits you in the face or the stomach or where else. And then also I lived in a place where in the 90s, early 90s, the movement of the neo-Nazis started, which made it all a lot more systematic and worse in a sense. I developed a way of thinking because I was going by bus to school like almost an hour every morning. I developed a way to see, okay, where are the neo-Nazis now? If I go on that bus, are they coming on the same bus? I developed a way of, okay, I need to sit as close to the chauffeur as possible so I have a way out. And all of this in the moment, I wasn't actually understanding that it was happening. But when I'm an adult and have 4 kids myself between 11 and 21, and I know more or less how their minds work and how my mind worked, and I never talked about it with my parents, never. I just kind of had these strategies to escape as soon as I could. So that was kind of that thing that I just understand that you need me out of the way, but I don't understand why. But I understand that you don't need me to be here. You don't need me to exist. And at the same time, there was also a political party called Hvit Valgallianse, who said on the morning news that all adoptees should be sterilized. That was the part of their political party. And in that instant, I was 17. And I felt like, oh gosh, I'm never going to have a family. That was the first thought that I thought. It's like, they're taking away my possibility to have a kid. They would have preferred me to be deported, but if I had to stay, they had to sterilize me. And that was like on the 8 o'clock news on my way to school. And I was in the middle of a teenage bunch who were talking about makeup and I don't know what. And I was just like, I lost every possibility to have a good future, which for me in that moment at 17 was to sometime have a family. And I think that these experiences have kind of set their mark on me because society kind of let it happen. They let it happen that there was a party, political party that actually had this on a part of their program. And we just kind of had to accept it. And I didn't speak about it to anybody. What should I say? Hey, because I didn't have the words for it. And I also remember that I had been to a concert because I had my first and only boyfriend, which was a guitar player, and I went to a concert to the next city. And I don't remember anything about the concert. I only remember that me and a friend of mine were running like hell to get to the bus because we were chased by neo-Nazis just for existing. And today it's still like, so when I look back, it's like I felt totally alone. Yeah, I had my friends and such, but I didn't talk to them about it. I didn't know how. And then I think today, if we get a little bit to today, we have had the 22nd of July. I was recently at Utøya as a part of a conference that our foundation was a part of, talking about democracy, anti-racism, how do we actually do this, what's going to happen, how can we contribute, etc. I think the theme was also, is school always the answer when we are in the fight against racism? And all of a sudden I sit in this room and there's a young boy there who has grown up at the exact same place as me, which is very rare that I meet, because I moved into Oslo because I want to be a part of diversity. I was just like, I wanted to rest from all the looks like you don't belong here. But then when I sit there and he asks me, yeah, how was life? How was life growing up? And I'm just like, well, told him basically the same stories. And he's like, was that how it was like to growing up in my city? Because years pass. And young people that haven't experienced it, they tend to forget it. And then at that moment, I just felt the thing that, when we always say we will always remember. But in order to be able to remember, we need to just tell the stories again and again and again and again, even though it's hard for us to tell them and listen to them. But we need the younger generations as well. And also to speak, because they were like, do adoptees really experience racism? Why? Because the mindset is, you're Norwegian. See? So I think that many adoptees live different scenarios where they, because of their skin colors, are either discriminated against or they feel the racism on their bodies and in their minds. Very often, I think. And now they have started to talk about it. And also that leads us a little bit to the 10th of August and the murder on Johanne Zhangjia, Ile Hansen, which also was adopted from China, and how society reacted to it. And a lot of the environment where we move in the adoption field, we're very skeptical to even start speaking about, could this be racially motivated? Because the story I just told you, for me and for my colleague from the foundation, we were just like reactivating trauma. That was the 90s, and now it's happening again. What happened in between here? How is it even possible that this can happen again? And I think it hits hard for maybe the Asian society as well. And it was the first time that we heard adoptive kids like age 10 from China asking their mom, could I be killed because I'm adopted from China? And that is just like, because the mind of the child, it's kind of naive, but it is also in a development. So they kind of just see, who am I? Who was killed? Could it happen to me? And I remember that in the 90s, I was so sure. I was living with this idea that if there's a third world war, they're going to come for me first. Because they're going to come by skin. It doesn't matter if I've watched children TV programs forever and know all the social codes. If I speak perfectly Norwegian, if it's a third world war and it's the Nazis, they're just going to kill me. And that's actually what we see from 22nd of July as well. Because part of that manifest is that adopted kids or adoptees need to be out of here. We are like the major traders, or even worse, our spouses, because they are then contributing to diversity in the poorest way in their way of thinking.
There's a lot to unpack there, and I think like when you're, describing your experiences, and thank you for sharing as well and being so open. I started reflecting my own experiences. In the UK, we do have a party who don't like foreign-born kids like me. And in fact, at one point they were saying like, we will take away our passports and our identity, our citizenship. And at that point, I was working on stateless migrants here. And I started thinking, damn, if they take my passport away, where am I? Where's home for me then? Because I don't have anywhere to go. I can't really go back to Hong Kong. You
Yeah.
know, it's just like there was lots of thoughts in my head, like I'm going to be stateless.
Yeah.
And I have a daughter.
Yeah.
But this country doesn't give a shit, really, even if I'm the mother of my Norwegian-born daughter,
Yeah.
in a sense, because also at the same time when I was here, it was the 22nd of July, but also there's the rise of the FRP party, which is also very anti-immigrant sort of party. And I remember Sylvia Listhaug was on the news basically saying that we as foreign mothers should be happy that our kids are here in Norway. And we as mother can fuck off in our own country.
Yeah.
And I remember like listening to that really hit me hard, like going, how worthless my life is here.
Yeah.
You know? And so when you were talking about your own experiences, it brought back so much of that memory really for me. And we also touched on Johanne Zhangjia, who was murdered by her brother. And I think there were so many signs even before that.
Yeah.
And I think you were the only foundation who actually did a protest outside Stortinget in saying like, this was racially charged, murder of her. Before he went off and did an attack on the Muslims.
Yeah.
And I think all this is connected, it's all connected despite the fact that you're here and born here or raised here and able to speak fluent Norwegian.
Yeah.
When people see you, you are different.
Yeah.
You know, you're not that white Norwegian. And I think it goes to show how deeply embedded discrimination and racism is. And as adoptees, I also know that as a foundation as well, you've been pushing through in a lot of institutions to get help, to get them, to collaborate with you, to understand that there was this need. And I remember you told me an incident that, I think it was Bufter, was it, you spoke to, and then they did a conference, oh, now I have the material, but they never invited you to actually speak.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, it wasn't Bufdir, but it was another institution. But what you're pointing to there is exactly the core of being a minority. I think sometimes that there are so many times we can deliver information about ourselves and a third party says, oh, thanks, we will use it, instead of say, hey, let's go, we can walk this walk together. We can explore this together and we can make a better world together in large terms. And that has been very important for us because there is this saying that nothing about us without us. And that is very, very valid for adoptees. And you can have so many experiences as an adoptee. There are 20,000 from 37 different countries. So there are so many stories and you can, so many stories. But there is always this importance that you should listen to the adoptees, but not just listen, but you should actually interact with them. And that might be the core also of the foundation, that we want to explore. If there are topics that are so hard to talk about, we need to talk about them. And we need to accept that maybe we don't have the words. Maybe between, for instance, adoptive parents and the adoptee, maybe they have to sit down and talk about which words are we going to put on this thing that we feel. And we need to be brave enough to do that. Even it can be on like an individual level in the family, or it can be between institutions or groups, etc. And that is the core of the foundation, that we need to be curious together and we need to explore together. We can never say that, we have the one answer and this is the way it has to go. Because we don't. Because we're humans and we have our own experiences. And I also think that it's so important to be open-minded to things that you haven't talked about before, that you don't understand, which is good, for instance, for this podcast, because you're exploring how was that experience for you with many groups, when many representatives from different experiences. And I think that that's the way that we can be a little bit wiser if we are willing to actually listen. And that's also a thing that we're doing in the foundation. We want to speak about the unspeakable, because when racism hits inside the family, where you're supposed to be safe. And we have already talked about the attachment, the abandonment, the identity. And if you as a kid experience racism from your grandma or your aunt or even your parents or a sibling, then where are you going to go? Who are you going to talk to? Because that's supposed to be your safe zone. And if we can't talk about that, which I think is very difficult for both the society, adoptive parents, and probably adoptees as well. I think many adoptees really want to talk about it, but they don't know how. So that's one area where we really need to facilitate for people to talk to each other. Because if we can't talk about that, where are we going to end up?
Yeah. I think it's really interesting, the point you made as well. And it almost is, you know, I'm only imagining in your footsteps a little bit. I'm not saying that I am, but in that situation, but the negotiation almost, because you were talking about the fear of you know, losing people that took care of you, really. And so I can only imagine how fearful it is to bring up a topic that could potentially break apart the kind of relationship you would have with your adoptive parents. And it's a negotiation because you kind of need to rely on them for shelter, food, you know, all the basic needs as well, and motherly love or parent love. And then bringing this up might, in many ways, compromise that safety net that you probably have. And this is kind of a negotiation. And I don't know if any of the adoptive parents even think along those lines, you know, how scary it must have been, you know, for any child or in whatever age group. You know, you're an adult now, but I could still imagine it being tough for you to even talk about this.
Yeah, and I hope that more and more adoptive parents are talking about this. I think, I have to maintain hope that they do. But it is difficult also because sometimes the adoptee turns white, if that makes sense. Because I grew up and the one person that I love, that I know that is there with me is my mom, and she's white. I'm not white. I would love to be white so that I wouldn't be different. And once those thoughts start in a brown body, then the mind is tricking you into feeling white, acting white, whatever that is. And then you might end up in a situation where you're the discriminator, where you are the person that, because your survival strategy is to laugh, or it is to deny, or it is to say the racist slur before anybody else in the room can manage to say it, then all of a sudden we can, in some cases, look at a person, an adoptee, that is the kind of with the racist mindset. And I do believe that that's because it's the lack of words, the lack of space. And once that adoptee sees, because many adoptees, I think, will say, well, when I was outside playing with the kids, I was like all the other kids. I saw my cousins, I saw my friends, they were white little kids playing around. I thought I was like them. But then, when I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw that I had another skin tone. And everything fell apart. So I hid the mirror, or I just didn't look in the mirror again. And then you grow up, and then you see, whoa, how did I spend my life looking at me and my identity? And then some people live very nicely with it. It's not an issue. It's not an issue. But other people then start to, who else can I look to? It could be, for instance, I think it was very powerful at the manifestation the 24th of August in 2019, when we were outside the parliament, that there was a Chinese man who wanted also to say something from, like, almost like a representative of the Chinese society, to say to all adoptees, we are all China, we are all Chinese, and we want to include you, we heard with you. And for me, for instance, the Latin American society doesn't have to be Guatemalan. It can just be general Latin America, meeting Latinx everywhere, for them to say, hey, you have a home with us. But sometimes that's also difficult, and that's the adoptees' kind of huge challenge, because in my process, if I have kind of discovered I'm not white, I am whatever skin tone, and then I say, hey, I want to go to the Guatemalan, Chilean, Colombian, Brazilian, or Cuban society, and say, hey, I'm here. And then all of a sudden, I don't have the language. I don't understand the cultural codes. And maybe I come from a class in my country that is the lowest of the classes. And how am I supposed to be received by the higher classes? And all of a sudden it's so mind-blowing for me because I just wanted to dance salsa. See? And then we are in need of the society, of the Chilean society, Colombian, Guatemalan, whatever it is. It could be 34 other countries, right? We need them also to be welcoming. But we also have to remember that many of those countries have wounds. Like if we look to Chile, there has been a period where babies were actually robbed and sent to Scandinavia, Europe, etc. So adoption, that is also a very important part of the foundation, to take a step out and see not what's going on here, but how are the biological mothers doing? How's the biological family doing? And those representatives of those are calling us on WhatsApp or wherever social media asking, could you help us to find my kid? Because on the other side, there could be a mom, dad, parent, sibling that are looking for the lost kid. And then we are talking about both racism and discrimination at a huge level, but is in the birth country. So there are so many layers here.
No, but I can understand that as well, because I'm born in the UK.
Yeah.
So there's a term for people like me, bananas.
Yeah.
So yellow skin on the outside, white on the inside.
Yeah.
So I grew up in a very British culture.
Yeah.
With very Western thoughts. Although my family, my parents were Chinese and, you know, from Hong Kong. So I remember, like, before we had the interview, we were trying to translate the term, like, vacuum.
Yeah.
And the closest that I can sort of translate that into English is kind of in between cultures.
Yeah.
Sort of falling in between cultures all the time, where, you know, you're part this and part that.
Yeah.
You know, particularly before I came to Norway, I felt more British.
Yeah.
But when I came here to Norway, I felt a little bit more on the Hong Kong side.
Yeah.
Despite a lot of, like, my habits of Britishness, of needing milk and sugar in my tea, you know, and the way I talk, the way I express, and the language that I use, is going ultimately be in English in a certain way.
Yeah.
It'd be very difficult for me to kind of speak in this sort of way in Cantonese, even though it's fluent enough, but I cannot read and write to a level that, say, a native Hong Konger is. But also the language develops. Yeah. So we're going back into language a little bit, where, you know, you talked about, like, not being able to use the language from, you know, your birth country, you know, to be able to understand the culture. It's the same with me sometimes. Yeah. I go back to Hong Kong, and then the language has developed in a certain way. Too many slang words that is mind-blowing for me. It's like you have to learn something new, and also the cultural cues. Yeah. So, like, there were times, like, at the restaurant we'd be sitting, and so we have, like, if you have a fish, you should, when you take out the bone, you never flip the bone. Apparently, if you flip the bone, you're basically cursing everyone to die, basically. Yeah. So
that's not a good idea.
It's basically these tiny little things that you don't know about until you kind of made a mistake, and it's just like, you know, you get told off or something. Yeah. I can only imagine how it feels like, I just want to learn salsa, but, you know, I have to deal with all these other layers towards that as well. Yeah. But also the language to talk about racism and discrimination. Yeah. Now, I know Norwegian to a good enough level, but I still find it very difficult to talk about racism in Norwegian.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because it's not much, I feel like the vocabulary, in English we have a lot more terminology around racism, whereas I feel like in Norwegian, like you said, you're kind of building up, what kind of language is this? What I'm trying to feel, what is it? Yeah. And sometimes I feel like I could find it in English, but the equivalent in Norwegian, if I really dig into it, there isn't. Yeah. So even if I'm researching papers in Norwegian about racism, they actually ended up using a lot of English terms, you know, particularly when it comes to, you know, post-separation abuses and things like that. So I think that there's an interesting point, the things that you were making, these layers. And I think that that's what racism discrimination is, really. Yeah. It's intersects with our intersectional identity of who we are, you know, as a gender, as a woman, color and ethnicity, and all this kind of thing. So I guess like where I want to bring to now is that, you know, we looked at your journey and the kind of impact it made on to you on a personal level, and then that led you to the foundation. Is what do you see could be changed? What do you want, like, as a, not to say like this is going to be the one and only solution to deal with this, but more like, what is the way forward now? What is the next step, I guess, for the foundation and for you personally to want to see those change? You know, what could be done?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that could be done, but I think we have to maybe go a little bit back to solidarity and the collective mindset. I feel that in our work, the individual it's like very individually based, which can be good, and we do need it. But I sometimes think that if we could only be a little bit more acting in solidarity, then we could reach so much further. And that's a part of the foundation, which was very interesting that you were talking about the languages, etc. Because a part of our foundation is also to talk to other minorities or other groups that we can say, hey, but okay, I'm adopted, but it's not their main focus. But I want to talk to you because maybe we have the same feelings about some things, and then we can kind of see, hey, it's not so strange that I feel it. And it's not necessarily just for that one reason, but we can kind of open up a little bit more the space and the way to talk about it and interchange experiences and such. So I think that for the foundation, it is still to facilitate the space, the network, and to see where that leads us. Because we are at a point where politically we need them to give us money to do our job. That's like always, without money you can't do a lot of things, but we still continue doing it. Some mornings and some evenings and some nights, my colleague and me, we ask ourselves, why are we still doing this? Why are we carrying the weight of a lot of people? It's because we believe that there can be a change. So the 10-year perspective will always be that this needs to be a part of the law, that people are going to be able to receive the help with the competence, with the research, etc. That needs to be a base so that you can help the adoptees in the right way that they need, not just what society thought they needed, but what they actually need. So I think that change is something we just have to keep on working every day, minute by minute, meeting new people, doing what we have been doing, but also opening even more wider spaces to talk about things and to listen. I think it's so important that we listen to other people, because we have been working with this for so many years, like 3 decades, in different kind of focuses. And if I would say, I know everything about adoption, then I kind of lost, because there will always be something new or a nuance that I haven't thought about from either perspective, from the adoptive parents, which are actually, and I'm so happy that they are actually using the foundation as well, calling us, hey, maybe they have a relation where they couldn't actually talk to their adult adoptee, but they can talk to us instead, and then we can kind of interchange ideas and thoughts and worries, which makes them being able to, maybe I shouldn't push my kid or my youth or my adult too much. Maybe I just need to take care about my worries to be a good parent. So we need to be there for them and always see, what can we do? We need to be there for the younger generations who have new experiences. I grew up in the 1890s. I hope that that the situation is a little bit different, but we know that racism exists, so it will always appear when we least expect it to, but be able to listen to them. And the third part, which is the biological parents, the origin countries, that we always need to create that space as well. Because during these dialogues, during our work, we will be moving rocks a little bit, and we will be seeing, and then we can take one step forward. In my personal life, I think that language is key, like you said. Once I went to reunite with my mom, my biological mom, and my siblings, And once I was pregnant the first time, I was 100% sure that my love language and language with my kids would be Spanish. But at age 20, I didn't, well, I knew maybe 10 words Spanish, so I educated myself. So now today I'm an interpreter, authorized interpreter, and an audiovisual translator. So I had to walk all of these steps to create the Guatemalan or Spanish or Latino part of me. That is kind of saying, I won't forget my history, in neither the Norwegian or the Guatemalan, but through my kids to give them my language, my original mother tongue, has been so important. And also for the racism aspect, I have 4 kids between 21 and 11, 2 boys and 1 non-binary and 1 girl. And then it's my job to be that parent that I didn't have when I was alone. I didn't know how should I say it. Will they feel sad? Will they feel hurt? Will I lose them? It's my job now to be the parent that says, hey, I don't know how you experience this. Can you please tell me, how does your world look? And it's also my job to say to my sons or daughters or non-binary kids, at home, we feel like this. When you go out in society, you might feel, or you might meet people who say this and that and the other, and that is very hurtful. And it's really because I have 4 kids with different skin tones, and it's also my job to be that parent that can say, hey, we need to talk about this. And I also need to be the daughter that says to my mom that maybe we should also change some Spanish words, some words that's like negrito. Yeah, we say it with love, but maybe even though we said it for 100 years, maybe we should change it. And that's like a lifelong project maybe, but it's like, I think that through language, I am creating my history about my in between culture, 2 cultures, whatever I am, but I am allowed to be it and I want to be it. And then language is kind of key to be able to transfer culture to them and the language and yeah.
What does negrito actually mean?
Black person. Yeah.
Okay, so similar to like a nigger.
Yeah.
Like sounding.
Yeah.
Right.
Sounding that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think like the equivalent for us as East Asian, like particularly in the UK, is ching chong.
Yeah.
So anyone says that has a very what is it called? This tasteful type of way.
Yeah.
Now I'm translating from Norwegian to English in my head now. It's like a disposable taste in your mouth, and
Yeah,
when
sure.
you feel something to say that. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, when I'm sitting here, it's just incredible the amount of work you've done over these years, with the foundation and what you've gone through as well. On top of this foundation, obviously, you don't get much financial income from that or some kind of support, and you work on top of a full-time job, and as a mother, and on top of this foundation, supporting other family and other individual adoptees. It's just amazing and incredible.
It's a lot, but it's kind of that collective solidarity thought, and it's the only right thing to do. It's the only right thing to do, because if I don't do it today, what am I going to tell to my kids or the adoptees that grow up now that are like 10 years now and they come to discover the same thing in 20 years? We cannot have that happen. They need to be able to say, hey, there was a foundation that fought for me. And today I have the right to maybe learn my mother tongue from a young age. Maybe I can have a psychologist that actually understands microaggressions. Maybe my parents can learn my language so that I don't have to adapt to them. Maybe we can do this together. And I want them to know when they see our work that somebody actually did it for them. It's not about for me or my colleague that, it's our story. It's not the individual thing. It's the collective, and solidarity is like, we made a change. Maybe we didn't get there. Maybe we will be there at 70 and 80 years old still fighting for this. But at least we know that we gave all. We tried everything. And there are still things to try out. So that's why we have to keep ongoing.
I think that's in itself is so beautiful, and I kind of when you're talking, I'm kind of reflecting on myself a little bit, and I'm learning through you as well. And you know, for me, like, I also have another job on top of this, and I'm not actually getting that much either. And I think you're spot on with having solidarity and this kind of allyship and moving together, and you know, recognizing your strength, your talent, and who you are. And I'm hoping that, you know, people are opening doors for you, walking with you in, and be able to make those changes to happen. We're coming to the end of the interview, so I'm just going to give the floor to you, what message you want to bring, or if there's anything else that's on your mind that you would like to talk about. Here's your moment.
here's my final, yeah. Thank you. Well, I think that, for instance, being a part of this podcast, a part of you guys asking us, hey, we need to speak about adoption. And we can say, yeah, we do. And then do it in a respectful and good way. That is a part of the change. And I think we need to always see, how can I change? And always ask the question, what can I do for you? In order than saying the other way around. I need you to do this for me because. So I think that's a very powerful thing, that both in personal life and also in the foundation, that yes, we need you to see us, but we also want to see you. And if we can do that, we can do so much more together. And I think that it might be Latin American, because me and my colleague are both from Colombia and Guatemala. We have this solidaridad. El pueblo unido. You know, the whole village will never be vencido. It will never be, we will always win if we stick together. So I think that's one part of it. And I think that is so important. Because everybody needs to feel that they are a part of something. And it doesn't matter where you came from, when you came here, how well you speak the language, how well you understand the social codes. But if you can kind of wake up in the morning and say, hey, I want to be a person that's including, open, and willing to ask. And very importantly, if I think I know I have the truth, I'll check again with you. I understood whatever you said. I think that was what you meant. And give you the space to say, hey, no, I didn't mean that at all. And actually have that dialogue. I think dialogue is so key to be able to, even at micro and macro level, to have that dialogue and to dare to explore. I think that is the most important thing we can do.
So if the people are listening in, how can they reach out to you?
Oh, yeah, we're available 24/7. No, we have, you can reach us on Facebook, Instagram, email, phone. You will find very easily our contact info on, for instance, Facebook. It's totally okay to write a mail if you're not a talkative person. It's totally okay to say, hey, I need to meet you at that coffee shop at that hour. It's totally okay just to send a messenger. You can basically reach out however you feel comfortable. And you don't have to be adopted. You don't have to be adoptive parents. You can just be like, hey, I'm curious about this. I never thought about. And then we see a lot of times that there are always somebody who knows some person that was actually adopted from some kind of country, either in Norway or inter-country adoption. So we're pretty easy to reach, and we have developed a very good network of many persons from different countries who are also ready to speak and meet.
And when they go on Facebook, is it like Adopsjon I endring in Norwegian?
Yeah,
right? Yeah. Okay.
Adopsjon I endring.
I endring. There you go. So once again, I just want to say thank you for sharing your story and the work you do at the foundation. Keep going on, and if there's anything that you think that I can do as well, we're happy to collaborate and help in any way we can.
Yeah, likewise.